It's Learn with Mr. Lewis. I'm Mr. Lewis. Glad to see you. It's great to be here. Hopefully, you enjoyed last week as we were in Washington, D.C., and you got to see some of the great things that we got to see in Washington, D.C. And that got us thinking, you know what? We've decided to change things up here at Learn with Mr. Lewis. We're learning. This is all in its infancy, and we're trying to figure out the best way to do it. And we've decided that there's a better way than what we've been doing. So up to this point, at the end of this weekly episode, I would also go through the 5 events of today in history. But we decided that those have been working better as shorts. And so we're going to continue doing Today in History each weekday as shorts. And then this video is just going to be dedicated to the random musings of Mr. Lewis and what it's like to be a teacher and what are some of the things that I enjoy. And so let's get right into it. This week, Learn with Mr. Lewis, I'm going to be telling you about the 10 historic sites that I have visited that I have loved the most. So these are my top 10 historic sites. Now, I'm not the most well-traveled person in the world. I realize that. I'm getting there. I'm working on it. But I've been to some places, and I'd like to share with you my 10 favorites. Now, with that, realize that the only places I've been are in North America and in Europe. So I know there's a lot of the world that's getting left out of this because I haven't been there yet, but I'm working on it. So let's get right into it. Number 10. Number 10 is the Vasa. Now, you may or may not have heard of the Vasa, but it's a fascinating place. And in fact, the Vasa, this museum that it's located in, is the most visited museum in all of Scandinavia. Well, where is it? It is in Stockholm, Sweden. So the Vasa is a ship, a massive ship, an expensive ship built between 1626 and 1628. And this ship sunk on its maiden voyage in Stockholm Harbor. Embarrassing. And then it was rediscovered by a man named Anders Franzen, who had searched for 2 years for this ship in Stockholm Harbor and found it in 1956. And we're the beneficiaries today. It's sort of like Pompeii. It's a tragic event, but we get to experience it in its complete form. Moving along. Number 9, Sachsenhausen concentration camp. This is a Nazi concentration camp in Oranienburg, which is near Berlin. And I visited there in 2022, and it was a powerful experience. I'd never been to a place quite like this before, and it was moving. This camp was open from 1936 to 1945. You had about 30 to 35,000 political prisoners and, of course, Jews that were held in this camp. Because it was so close to Berlin, it also served as a central training facility for the SS and the Guards. And there was a cremation facility, the remains of that cremation facility, and that was a powerful thing to see. And why the remains of it? Well, it was destroyed by Soviet soldiers when they liberated the camp. So many amazing things to see there. I highly recommend Sachsenhausen near Berlin. Number 8. Now, this is a very personal one for me. This is the first community cemetery in St. George, New Brunswick, Canada. I visited there in 2019, and it's a personal thing for me. My ancestors during the American Revolution were loyalists, traitors. Or were the patriots the traitors? Food for thought. Anyway, my ancestors were loyalists, and their property was seized in the colony, well, the state of Connecticut. And so they were forced to move. And by the way, their property being seized, that went against the Treaty of Paris, but we won't even go there. They ended up in New Brunswick, and they spent time in places like St. John, Beaver Harbor, Seeley's Cove, and St. George. And I was able to go to the cemetery there, and it was a wonderful experience for me. And I was able to find the grave of my third great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandfather's brother, and that was a really cool thing. Next, number 7, La Sagrada Familia. This is just an absolutely amazing cathedral in Barcelona, Spain. The construction began in 1882, and the architect, of course, was the great Antoni Gaudí. And Gaudí is unique among architects, and you really have to go to Barcelona to appreciate that, and you have to go to this church. It is absolutely amazing. And it's so different from any other church I've ever been to. And one of the coolest things inside is just the colors. And this was not something I was expecting. When it's the morning, the sun shines through these stained glass windows on the east side, and they're morning colors, orange, yellow, etc. And then in the evening, it's the purples and the blues shining through on the west side. You really got to go there, climb the tower and climb back down. Well, elevator to the tower and climb back down. It's amazing. Number six has to do with the place where I spent a couple of years of my life. Back in the 1990s, I lived in Italy for a couple of years. And one of the places that I visited, not once, not twice, but thrice, was Paestum. Paestum is about 60 miles south of Naples. And what makes it great? Well, you have some of the best preserved Greek temples, not Roman. I know it's Italy, but it's Greek temples anywhere in the world. There are 3 amazing, huge temples, and you get to walk around them. You can see in one of the pictures here of me standing there, tiny me, on the steps way back in the 1990s when I was a lot younger than today. These were built around 2,500 years ago, and Paestum is not to be missed. Underrated place to see in Italy. Number five is the British Museum, and I know there's controversy with the British Museum, and we kind of had a funny story when we went there. So this is in London, of course, and as we're walking around the museum, there's this English woman there who's talking to somebody else, and she says, "So this museum, I guess, is just all the stuff we nicked from everyone." Pretty much. There are a few things that should be there that are amazing, like the Sutton Hoo treasure, and there's an astrolabe from back in 1326, and there's a lot of other stuff that you could argue maybe shouldn't be there. But from my perspective, to be able to go there and see all of those things in one place was absolutely amazing. I mean, these are things that I've been learning about, things I've been teaching about. Greek sculptures like the amazing Elgin marbles. That's the highlight for me. The Rosetta Stone, Assyrian and Indian sculptures. It's just incredible. I love the British Museum. Moving now to number 4 on the list. That's the 9/11 Memorial in New York City. This is a difficult place to visit, but wow, is it a beautiful place to visit. I love how they created these amazing fountains that are in the footprint of the original Twin Towers. And that's one of the most moving things. You have the names of those who died on 9/11 that are carved surrounding those 2 footprints, those 2 beautiful waterfalls. The museum is powerful. It brought me to tears. And one of my favorite things there is the survivor tree. This is a tree that it was completely burned up, and there was one living branch. And since 9/11, back in 2001, it has grown into this big, beautiful tree. You can see a picture of it on the screen. You really need to go to the 9/11 Memorial. My number 3 place is in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and it is the Anne Frank House. This is another difficult place to visit. You can see a picture of my wife out front. We did a thing where we did a pre-tour, and by the way, you always need to book tickets ahead of time. You probably won't get in if you do not. But you can also, if you book far enough in advance, you can book this pre-tour where they take you into some other parts of the house that you wouldn't otherwise see, and they do a little lesson, I guess you could say, beforehand, and you get to see some cool things there. I definitely recommend that. But it was just amazing to go on a tour of a place that I've learned about ever since I was in junior high school. And as a junior high school teacher, a middle school teacher, that was powerful for me. And it was hard, but it was amazing. I highly recommend the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam. My number 2 place is right here in the United States. It is the Lincoln Memorial. It's my favorite place in Washington, D.C. It's an amazing and powerful place. The statue of Abraham Lincoln is just so epic. You know, his right side is in a powerful position. His left side is in more of a relaxed position, and you can see that in both his leg and his hand. And then, of course, you have the amazing Gettysburg Address that's on one side of this. And I love it so much. I love that line from the Gettysburg Address that's just so moving to me, where he says, "But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract." Then, of course, you've got the second inaugural on the other wall. And what it always makes me think of is how we were cheated out of a second term of our greatest president. And that brings us to number 1 on our list. And that is, of course, in Rome. I lived in Rome, and the place in Rome No, it's not the Colosseum. No, it's not St. Peter's. No, it's not the Capitoline Museum. There's so many great places, but the place for me, the number one, my favorite building in the world is the Pantheon. This was built in AD 125. And what's so crazy about this is that it is still standing. It's still in basically mint condition. And what ancient site do you have that's like that? The exterior is nice, but it's the interior. It's Romans and their architecture of space. This domed building, there's nothing like being in Rome on a hot day and walking into the Pantheon, and it's nice and cool. Oh, and when you go to the Pantheon, make sure you get some ice cream. There's some great ice cream shops around there, and you can see a 1990s Mr. Lewis eating some ice cream. I love it. In 1995, it was being cleaned, so I didn't get to see it in all its glory, but I have since. Well, I hope to. Yeah, next summer I'll be able to see it in all its glory. And hope you've enjoyed this episode of Learn with Mr. Lewis. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Let me know what places you've been to that's at the top of your list. I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think. If you've been to any of the places that I mentioned in this list, tell me what you think. Learn with Mr. Lewis. Do you want to see some more of Mr. Lewis? Of course you do. You're addicted. There's a great video here, another great video here, and you can subscribe right here. Do you want to see some more of Mr. Lewis? Of course you do. You're addicted.